Hello there. Today I'm going to go a little bit into a somewhat comprehensive breakdown on Lucius and how he works and how to try to use him. I somewhat stress try, because while he can do good damage, generally if you're including him, unless your team is somewhat specifically able to slot in a Watcher and has a Lord, like say Ingrid, possibly Laya, Lucius just ends up being frustrated to work with because chances are you're really just using him for phase 2 uh, to remove the buffs from the boss, phase 2 of Guild Boss 2. Um, and the problem with this is that you can't really time it exactly when you want because he will go into demon mode if you let him do enough pursuits, which kind of leads us to how to figure this out properly. There's kind of two ways to go around this. The first is to just not care about cycling this properly and hoping that RNG lines up in your favor and you just build them pure DPS, and some people have had reasonable success with this. Uh, this is the wrong guild boss. We didn't see that. It loads. Say this, for example, that's a Lucius that does a decent amount of damage. In the guild in itself, actually, there's someone who did some decent damage with it. 177. You can output some damage numbers with him, and you can just build them like that and kind of brute force your way through phase 2 with the rest of the comp. But if really you're just missing that little bit of removing the buffs from the boss, and you're trying to time it properly, which I actually spent a lot of time trying to do this because before I got my run tuned to go over 120k fragments, it just didn't work. I was ending up at, I don't know, some ridiculously low amount, like some to 7% of fragments. I tried slotting in Lucius. I got somewhat better results. I think I dropped down to 3% left on the boss, and I'm on my best try. But he was outputting low damage because of his build, and I just couldn't get it timed correctly all the time, because even with what I will get into right after this, he just RNG ended up being RNG. I will say one thing, Lucius in his current state is just frustrating. Lucius, before the community at large kind of complained about him, was substantially better, because you could pop his ult, and then he would have 4 different attacks, spread out over more time, which would remove 1 buff each, which made him a hell of a lot easier to time, but we're stuck with this crummy version now. So yeah. Point is, and this is the wrong tab, I did some testing onto how exactly he works and how to best use him. A few things here is that Semra has a set cycle of attacks, right, on phase 2. He's going to do an Earth Shatter. He's then going to do an Aegis. He's going to do a Palm Strike. And then he will do another Aegis before queuing back into the Earth Shatter. The best time to do Lucius's ult is at the start. As soon as the boss starts casting the second Aegis, you're going to want to cast Lucius's ult, because his animation will end up lining up pretty much exactly with when the 2 buffs will go up on the boss. And that means that you'll remove those 2 buffs, and you'll have a decent window of opportunity to pop all your ults, do a bunch of damage while the buffs are down. It also means that the Earth Shatter damage will be reduced. When I was testing this, this was quite fairly visible. The damage just went way down. And there's about 43 seconds between the start of one Earth Shatter to the next. And just basing myself off of that, his Lucius's stats, so there's also, depending on how you skill him up, right, he's gonna have a few things that change, mainly this. His pursuit trigger chance is gonna go up. His rage regen is gonna go up per attack. Both of those will change somewhat how soon he will trigger both his demon mode and his ult. So those are things that do need to be taken into account when you're trying to set this up correctly. And his ult duration lasts 20 seconds in the current state as well. Taking all this into account, I basically just kind of went and made him a few builds. I checked how much rage he was getting per hit, so you can see this. If you go into your build, total attributes, you can see this right here, and you can get information on this. You can know exactly how much he's actually doing, and you can actually start running the math on it, which is what I did. In a full regen and absolutely no speed build, he was doing these values, which essentially meant that he would reach his ult, you know, roughly in 40 seconds after the start of one ult, he would reach his second ult. Now that's the math that was behind it, but turns out that attack speed was kind of influencing this a lot to lead to differences. But actually this value is incorrect because I changed that build. I was testing stuff. Point is, right, you have a window of time here that's under the 43 seconds for a full summer cycle. Meaning that depending on how many attacks you've landed, you're going to have a certain window of opportunity on average to pop the ult before Lucius will almost certainly go into demon mode. And the more attack speed you have, the more this goes down. So the harder it is to time it, and the more complicated and more RNG prone everything becomes. In a full regen and virtually no speed build, you have essentially as much time in the world as you want. Because Summer can almost go through 2 full cycles before you will technically, and again theoretically, proc a demon mode. As you tweak stuff and try to get more interval, but also more rage regen, because I put a mana string here, you're going to have a lot less time. So this one was at, mana spring with some attack speed to get him down to 1.2 interval, ended up being, only 48 seconds, which is pretty close to a full cycle, so that kind of didn't really cut it. A generic DPS build basically ended up with him being at 40 seconds, which in my testing meant that as soon as the ult was up, you had virtually a matter of seconds, if not no seconds, to actually use him. And you couldn't hold it at all. So say you come out of phase 1, you couldn't exactly time the ult properly, or say you let the demon mode proc, because the demon mode does do good damage. By the time you get ready to do an ult again, chances are the demon mode is almost immediately going to start, and then you're screwed. So all this to say that what ended up seemingly working the best was a little bit of rage regen, and trying to get, if you can pull it off with, say, 1 or 2 speed substats, because I think on the last build here that I'm trying to talk about, I have kind of bad gear, really-ish, but I still have some speed substats because I just can't get away with not having any at all. If you could get it off, that's probably theoretically the sweet spot where you want to be. You want to be with, say, 1.5, 6, maybe 7 interval, and then more rage regen than I currently have in this build, and you would have a lot of wiggle room to hold your ults. Because, yeah, that's really just kind of it. If you can find that fine-tuned balance between reducing his attack speed enough, boosting his rage regen enough, and still retaining some of your offensive capabilities, that's probably the best build you could have for Lucius for Guild Boss 2. If, again, I stress this part, if you need to debuff the boss. If you can just get away with damage, then chances are just build him damage, let him go into demon mode every single time except phase 2, and during phase 2 just pop the ult whenever it's ready. Or even just let him go to demon mode, because if you can... Lucius does do acceptable damage, really. I don't like him because I'm biased against him. I don't like him because there was a lot of complaints and they changed him into an even worse version based off of those complaints, which was tremendously stupid. The point is, there are ways to somewhat fine-tune him. He is frustrating to build and to use properly, but people have had success with him. And hopefully this can somewhat help someone possibly pass one of those Aegis phases. Or not. But yeah, that's just somewhat of a breakdown that I did for Lucius for my own interest, and that's the shared version of it. I will put the Excel here with the math in the link of the video. I will, as usual, put a link to the GitHub, so you can have a text version of some of this in the video as well, or in the description. And that's about it. Cheers and have a nice one.